Welcome. I'd like to call to order the June meeting of the Board of Early Education and Care. Welcome to everybody here in the room. June signals the completion of the fiscal year for the agency, and I want to thank the team for a productive and impactful year. I know the Commissioner will highlight some of the accomplishments of the year, but I want to extend appreciation to everyone for your efforts this year. As we complete the year, we look forward to a new fiscal year with new goals and priorities to continue to meet the needs of children and families across the Commonwealth. We've done a lot to stabilize and heal, a term I use a lot that I got from the Secretary, so I have to give credit where credit is due. And I look forward to building off of that as we work to continue to innovate and strategically think about how we advance the field for our dedicated providers and the children and families that we serve. We look forward to an exciting meeting today where we'll recap a number of things and take a number of votes, including on the parent fee schedule and bylaws. But at this time, I'll turn it over to the Commissioner for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, board members. Yes, we're all very pleased to be here at the last meeting of the fiscal year. We'll take a little bit of a break for the summer before we reconvene at a strategic planning retreat in August and get back to our regularly scheduled meetings in September. I have a number of quick updates, and then, as the chair said, we'll spend a little bit of time on sort of a recap of the year, some of the things that the board's prioritized and accomplished. So first, a couple personnel announcements. I'm really pleased to introduce you to Bethany Glass. Bethany, can you just raise your hand or stand up? She is our new Director of Child Care Financial Assistance, a position the agency hasn't had before, so we're thrilled under the leadership of Tyrese Nicholas, our Deputy Commissioner for Family Access and Engagement, bringing the voice of the family and a lot of experience policy work, joining us most recently from the Department of Children and Families, where she was their early learning program manager and spent many years building an infrastructure to support access to high quality early education for kids involved with DCF, and you will bring that work here, and we are so thrilled that you decided to bring your talents here, so thank you so much. Welcome. Also pleased to introduce Alana Davidson. Oh, is she in the room? Oh, she's next door. All right, she'll be in a second, hopefully. Oh. Alana Davidson? No? No, that would be Julie Asher. Okay. But we welcome you too. We have a new Director of Communications, Alana Davidson. She'll be joining us in a minute and have a chance to meet the rest of the board. We're thrilled to welcome her most recently from the Department of Transitional Assistance, where she acted as Communications Director there. Also played a critical role in interagency initiatives and helped coordinate the work of the COVID-19 Command Center's Food Security Task Force during the pandemic and a lot of the food security work at the agency. We are thrilled to have her, and again, welcome her and look forward to her bringing the talents. I also wanted to mention that we just posted this week our first ever Director of Learning, Training, and Development, or Learning, Development, and Training, which would be a new role to the agency that we haven't had before that will be focused on both internal training opportunities. We have not had a training team, although we have very complicated policies, procedures, and regulations, so very important that we're doing what we can to support staff, both in their professional development, in their onboarding, in opportunities for internal advancement, and agency culture. So we're really thrilled to have the opportunity to start building this new team by hiring a director. So if anyone is interested, that information is on Mass Careers and also on our LinkedIn, the new EEC LinkedIn webpage. So. In terms of the FY24 budget, I know the Secretary will not be able to join us until 2 p.m., but we sent a fairly lengthy update to the board, so we are still waiting. The Conference Committee has been named, and so I think the different versions of the budget are being discussed, but so I just wanted to say that we are really thrilled by the support we've received, starting with an incredibly strong budget coming from the Governor's Office, 25% increase over last fiscal year. And both the House and the Senate budgets include incredibly strong commitments to the agency. We think it's going to be a very good budget year for us, and we look forward to that being finalized and having it continue to support the good, strong work of the agency in healing and stabilizing and transforming as well. Some good news out of the Operational Services Division. We are welcoming Alana Davidson, who's our new Director of Communications. There she is. We have talked at some points at this board about a law, the Operational Services Division. There's a law in the Commonwealth called the Price Limitation Law, which effectively disallows charging the government a different price than you would charge a private client. In the childcare environment, this particular rule, although makes sense in a functioning market, that we should not be, as the state, charged differently than a private client buying the same service. But we do not have a functioning market in childcare. And so our ability to maintain affordability, and for programs across the state to maintain affordability, they sometimes offer scholarships or reduced fees. And as we work as a board and as a Commonwealth to raise rates, that can sometimes disrupt affordability for care for families who are receiving private scholarships or reduced fees. So the price limitation has been, that law, which does apply in childcare at present, has been waived the last several years. And we requested from the Operational Services Division, while we continue our work to stabilize and heal, an additional year of a waiver. We received approval of that this week. So very pleased. We were concerned that the reinstatement of that law in the child care space would cause a great deal of disruption in terms of affordability for families. So really grateful to the Operational Service Division for their partnership and recognition of sort of the status of the early education and care field. I also wanted to give a quick update on the EEC pilot. This is the program that's providing scholarships for early education and care staff working in programs across the Commonwealth, funded through FY23 appropriation by the legislature. I would say runaway success. We have reached more than 2,000 families or children that are that received a priority access or a priority code. We have 850 children already enrolled, and the rest are in process in some version. So we know that there's also challenges with that program in terms of, as we continue to try and increase the salaries of staff, that they might be bumping up against our eligibility rates. So that's something we'll be keeping track of. We will anticipate, based on the different versions of the budget, being able to maintain that program, which has been such an important tool, and to continue to learn about its role and benefit in terms of recruiting and retaining staff, as well as reaching families with additional compensation, which is an important part of the goal. Finally, I just wanted to mention that we have a new homepage on our website, thanks to our new communications director and the work of many in the agency. So we're doing a lot of work to update the website and make sure that the content is really organized by our key user groups, which we've been doing across many aspects of the agency over the last year. So inviting any of you and the members of our community to be in contact with the Commissioner's Office if there are parts of the website or suggestions or areas that you all feel need to be updated or that are currently out of date. So look forward to making that website as accessible entry into information about what the agency is doing and what services and benefits we have as we possibly can. Okay, that is
Great.
the end of my update.
Thank you, Commissioner. And on behalf of the board, I do want to welcome Bethany and Alana to the team. You're joining at a really exciting point in time, and we look forward to seeing your added contributions to all the great work that's occurring in the field. I also do want to recognize members Charlotte Travers and Maura Siegel, who are joining us by phone here for this meeting. At this point, I want to move to the public comment portion of the meeting. Is there anyone here present for public comment? Seeing none, I do want to acknowledge that the board has received public comment via email and has been distributed prior to the meeting. We have 2 items of routine business. We'll start with the approval of the minutes from the May 9th, 2023 board meeting. Are there any additions, corrections, or edits to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, I make a motion to approve the minutes of the May board meeting. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Carolyn, and I will call the roll. Georgia Tanasoff.
Yes.
Linda Sager.
Yes.
Carolyn Kane.
Yes.
Maria Moeller.
Yes.
Jamela Lee.
Yes.
Cheryl Travers.
Abstain.
Maura Siegel.
Yes.
Great. Motion is approved. The next piece of routine business is for the meeting schedule for the fiscal year 2024. I do want to note for people watching and for people in the room that we have, for the last couple of years, met on the second Tuesday of every month, and in the next fiscal year, we'll be moving to the second Wednesday of every month at 1 p.m. So I do want to just bring note to that for the public as we move forward with this vote. But I do want to move that the Board of Early Education and Care, in accordance with General Law, Chapter 15D, Section 3B, shall meet in accordance with the schedule set forth above, and that all meetings will begin at 1 p.m. and will be held at 50 Milk Street, Boston, Mass., unless otherwise announced and duly posted. Can I have a second?
Second.
Carolyn, thank you. I will call a roll. Georgia Tanasoff.
Yes.
Linda Sager.
Yes.
Maria Moeller.
Yes.
Jamela Lee.
Yes.
Cheryl Travers.
Yes.
Maura Siegel.
Yes.
Great. The motion is approved. The FY24 meeting schedule is approved. And now we will get to some of the meat of today's conversation, which is to have conversation and engage with the team here on a couple important topics. So I'll hand it over to the commissioner to get us started.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll invite Jocelyn Bound to join me up here and give a few moments of sort of introduction. So the primary purpose of this agenda item is for us to begin what we've been calling with the board a discussion around Chapter 1 of our work around promoting quality and really the agency's theory of action around quality and programming. At the chairman's urging, we are going to start this conversation with a little bit of a year in review. We spent a lot of time in the last year over different parts of the system. It was a good opportunity for us to take a look back over the board's accomplishments and the work that the agency's undertaken in the past year or so. And that has positioned us to be able to have this conversation around quality. We have spent a lot of time really looking at the strategic action plan. These will be very familiar to everyone. We've started most of our meetings with these. These are the key pillars within our strategic action plan, our key groups, and our goals and outcomes that the board put in their strategic action plan. And I would say they have been durable over time. Although as we have moved into sort of execution and implementation of the strategic action plan, we have come to appreciate deeply that they are not separate pillars, but actually interconnected sets of users and experiences. So many of the initiatives that we've pursued and made progress on over the last year really cross user groups. So while the agency has looked to make sure that the experience of our children and families, our educators and our providers are improved and modernized and made more dignified, we realize that many of the initiatives actually cross user groups. So obviously reforming child care financial assistance has been one of the top things that the agency and the board has taken on. And that has included the regulation reforms that you all voted on. But it's also included a number of short-term interventions into the system to make it more accessible, more functional for families. And I'm happy to report that as of today, we have just over 55,000 families receiving child care financial assistance from the agency. And when I first got here in March of 2022, that number was 48,000. So we've reached a great deal number of new families. We have a goal through the FY24 of getting back up to 58,000, which was the high mark back from 2019. Other reforms that we're pushing out sort of in the interim, and which I'm pretty excited about, is that we just started a texting campaign. So for families, just a pilot so far. So for families who are coming up on the waiting list and eligible for financial assistance, they're getting a text from us to try and expedite communication. That text is supplementing what the traditional communication method was, which was snail mail. So we're, as we talk about internally a lot, most of us like the way we want to do business with our banks or many of our service providers, or making reservations or understanding different services that are available, that many of us want to do it either on our phones or at the convenience times and locations that make sense, and we're trying to bring that as much as we can to our families. Similarly, we just launched email, a full-scale text and email effort to clean up the waiting list. So we have about 20,000 families that are on the waiting list for child care financial assistance. Many of those records may be older than a year. And one thing we've learned from the early educator pilot is that the newer those records are, the more likely it is we'll be able to enroll families quickly. So we want to make sure that that data and information is as up to date as possible. So it's really, again, part of our digital future. So we're taking a small step into that direction and looking forward to advancing that further. In terms of rate increases, we spent a lot of time in $80 million rate increase, historic rate increase, but also by the board's direction, the thoughtful approach to making sure that we were meeting federal compliance, but also understanding impact on the field. And now we have the first ever cost study that will help us inform a rate increase coming into this next year, and making sure that we're looking and bringing an equity lens to our work around rates, as well as making sure that we are reflecting in our rates, not just the price, but also the cost. So the family experience as well as the programs and providers. Obviously, we spent a long time in the last year focusing on the Commonwealth Cares for Children, and I think the biggest accomplishment is, and really I think one of the only in the nation where that previously federally funded program is now fully state funded, set out to stabilize programs in the midst of the pandemic and fluctuating enrollments and successfully really maintaining capacity in the field. The continuity of that program through this last fiscal year and into next fiscal year will allow us to continue to focus on making sure that there's capacity in the field. I think we reported to you in May of 2022 that we had 221,000 licensed slots across the state. And in June of 2023, we're now at 230,000. So we know that that program is really essential for maintaining capacity for several years, and we are seeing additional capacity coming into the field. Going to take a look at that regionally and also by type of care to understand. And we also know that licensed capacity continues to be different than staffed capacity, which is where our workforce initiatives come in. So a lot of time spent in the last year, and I want to thank the members of the subcommittee on workforce who helped us really focus on the urgent need to focus on the pipeline of building new educators coming into the field. We're making excellent progress on thinking about supported pathways, both for our family child care providers, recruiting new programs into the field, as well as thinking about a pipeline of supported pathways for our center-based programs, whether that be apprenticeships or mentorship programs or other ways. So while we continue to focus on the long-term professionalization of the field through our credentialing work, and we're going to look forward to reporting back on that to all of you in the fall. Finally, undergirding all of this is updating and modernizing agency operations. So, we've implemented a new organizational chart. We've hired a great deal of new talent, I think 58 positions over the last year, both increases and promotions internally, and as well as creating a digital blueprint for where we want to go in the future, reorganizing processes by our key user groups. We have a long way to go, but there's been an amazing amount of work, and I just want to take a moment to thank the team for their work over the past year. And also to the members of the early education and care field. I've had such an amazing opportunity to visit family child care programs, center-based programs, residential programs, from Pittsfield to Chatham, even just in the last 3 weeks. And I've learned so much from the folks who've opened their doors and invited us to come in and hear from them about the amazing things that they're doing and the challenges that they're experiencing. And all of that feeds directly into the work we do and how we do it. I also want to just take a moment to thank the members who've agreed to, we have recognized on this board for some time that a regular operational dashboard, sort of our capacity, caseload, so I'm talking about those verbally, but we think that information should be available to you on a regular basis as well as to the members of the public. And we have a new board working group that's going to spend a little bit of time thinking about key performance indicators and creating an operational dashboard. So looking forward to doing that work with all of you over the summer. We have also included in the deck for the purposes of both those at home and members of the board connections, links to all the board decks that reflect the work that we've done over the last year. So your work summed up in PowerPoints. So as we've worked on all of these initiatives over the past year, childcare financial assistance and the family experience, really focusing on affordability, especially for our lowest income families, the financial stability and health kind of the sector and of programs in general, and also on the workforce. We haven't spent as much time on what's actually happening in the classroom. And so I'm really happy today to have the opportunity to have sort of the first part of that discussion about how the agency is thinking about creating an infrastructure that can support a quality over time, and how we link that up, to our licensing regulations and our licensors who are out there every day, and begin to really think about a theory of action that can focus on what's happening in the classroom and supporting programs with what we're thinking about as a mindset of continuous quality improvement. So as I mentioned, we have been talking over time as we developed this deck that originally it was like 90 slides. So we really wanted to bring you just chapter 1 of this conversation, so that you know that what we're trying to do, like we have across all the other parts kind of the work we've done, is to build a strong foundation to launch innovation from. So a strong foundation of quality infrastructure built from our licensing standards, thinking about how do we support programs over time, whether it's with early literacy, which is something I know is a big priority for the board, or behavioral health supports, which is something we've been hearing increasingly as a big need in the field across all the programs that we've been talking to. So with that, chapter 1, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Commissioner, and it's great to be here, having the opportunity to talk about this after focusing on so many different issues, particularly over the last few years. I don't think I need to make the case with this group for the investment in quality early education, but it is certainly worth revisiting the research evidence that stands behind that investment as well. Decades of work has been done showing both relationships between particular high-quality practices and child outcomes, as well as impact evaluations that have demonstrated the ways in which there are impacts on school readiness, as well as long-term life success from access to a high-quality preschool program for 3- and 4-year-olds. But as we look ahead and think about how we move forward in setting goals and creating a structure around supporting quality, it's important that we define what we mean by high-quality learning and care environments. These are environments that are characterized by frequent, warm, supportive, stimulating interactions. Children have opportunities to play and learn in a safe environment where they can explore freely and engage broadly with opportunities to build their development. Planful curriculum is in place to shape their opportunities to learn through active experiences, but in ways that are also responsive to the individual needs of particular children. And families are empowered to engage in collaborative partnerships with programs that are also inclusive and supportive to the diversity of the families and children that they're serving. And if we translate this into a theory of action that can support us in both thinking about, sort of how are we implementing this, but also how are we measuring our success as we go, starting with our strategic action plan. If we commit to making high quality early education and care available and accessible to all families and children in Massachusetts, families will have the resources to thrive socially and economically, and children will be well prepared for school and lifelong learning. Digging in a little bit deeper, for us it's important to think about also what would we need to measure to do the ongoing tracking of success in building this type of system, and thinking about ways in which we can measure what's happening for children both in the sort of the most proximal environments, what's happening in the classrooms and the homes that we're working with directly right now, but thinking out to with early education as part of an integrated and aligned system that includes high-quality elementary and secondary education, what are some of the longer-term life outcomes that we would expect to see in children? So, again, returning to the context that we're working with right now, there are many strong standardized observation tools that can be used to understand the nature of the interactions happening in the classrooms and in the family child care homes. Those provide us with an opportunity to expand the use of those tools and think about ways that the information from those tools can be both used to support programs and thinking about where and how they might want to build their own practice or build practice within the program, but also at the systemic level give us information about what's happening in programs across the state. Screening in early education is really very, very important. Again, it's an opportunity to use both developmental, and increasingly there's attention on the importance of early literacy screening as well, to understand when there's a need for additional support for particular children. And again, those tools provide the opportunity to look at what's happening with individual children and make sure every child is getting the support they need. But also, if we can look at that information systemically, it tells us something about what's happening for children across the state during the early learning years. Looking out, I think we all know the third grade MCAS is the first standardized assessment that all children in Massachusetts encounter. And that becomes an opportunity to have a touch point on, sort of what's happening in elementary school for children, and looking to see that there are strong outcomes for children, and that those outcomes are consistent for all children. It's not some children are doing well and others are not doing as well, but really the goal across all of this is for this to be truly universal and supportive of all children. And looking further out and thinking about the transition to adulthood, looking for high levels of high school completion, as well as college attendance. So, sort of really, we can think about where we would think about these issues across the entire trajectory. Just making sure the folks on the phone are able to hear the presentation, and will let us know if there's anything they want to question, to bring a question forward. So starting to dig into, sort of how will we do this? It's important to recognize that we have a few different interconnected efforts. So we're thinking about the ways in which we're supporting programs. We're thinking about the ways that we're supporting educators. I think we've talked about these separately, but it's really important to recognize that these are both mechanisms that we have in place to support the ongoing quality improvement of programs. On the program side, as the Commissioner mentioned, we see continuous quality improvement as the engine that drives ongoing quality improvement programs. So really you're focusing resources on thinking about how we can support programs in, gathering information, using the information to assess opportunities, thinking about goals for ongoing improvement, a plan to address those goals, putting the plan into place, and then, stopping to reflect, assess again, and continuing on with the cycle. At the same time, we're also, as we've spoken with you before, working on building robust professional opportunities for educators and pathways for professional growth for educators. In this system, at sort of a more macro level, we're building a new credential to define the competencies that we would want to see for educators at different levels of their profession, from novice to expert. And those competencies really focus in on the practices that we would want to see in the classroom, which again, as we build that, we're thinking about how we directly align that to the types of expectations that we have for what we would see in a program. So the credential becomes a roadmap, not just for the educators, but also a tool that can support program improvement as well. We're working on building access to higher education and other professional learning opportunities. And again, those are opportunities for individual educators who want to build their own professional skills, but also opportunities that are available for programs. One thing that we've heard is, the sort of cohort approach to training and professional learning is a very powerful approach, and those tools should be available for programs to turn to too, and think about ways in which they might build the skills of their educators. We're working on the pipeline, as the Commissioner mentioned in her earlier remarks, thinking about how to support recruitment and retention of educators, and build up programs as stable employers that and part of that stability is including competitive compensation for educators. But another piece, as we know, is that when programs provide a strong professional learning environment for educators, that's a place that educators want to stay. So the continuous quality improvement process also supports programs in being strong employers for educators. So these two efforts really do need to work hand in hand as part of the ways in which we're supporting quality in the field. Just jump in, by the way, if you have questions. I'm going to be talking for a while.
I will just comment. I mean, I'm reflecting on this whole thing and just the arc of this conversation, from reflecting back to what we did, and I'm sitting here reflecting back to even when I joined the board, and the fact that we're back here talking about quality and a theory of action around quality is just exciting. And so appreciate the fact that this is back on the agenda, that the team is focused on it as we think about building off that foundation of the work that has been done over the last year. It's just, I'm stuck in all this information, because I'm just happy to be back here. So, yeah.
There's more.
Yeah. And it's only chapter 1, right?
Chapter 1, yep. So digging a little further deeper into the theory of actions and how we are defining the practices that we would like to see in the classroom. We've defined a set of domains of quality. These are really categories of practice, practices both for educators as well for program leaders within the program. The gears in this diagram, that I think you've probably seen a version of this before, highlight those categories. Adult-child interactions are at the center. Those are really the core of everything that happens for children. But curriculum and assessment is important. Attention to the physical environment is important, and the family engagement component as well. On the leader side, it's also important that educational leaders are in place in programs to build that professional learning environment I was talking about, and that there's strong business and administrative practices in place to support the stability of the program and the capacity of the program to do the work that we're talking about. And the ring around it, again, continuous quality improvement is the engine that's driving this, and so it's really important we're thinking about the support system we're putting in place for that activity. But also recognizing that all of that work also needs to center on attention for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, it is important that we're building a high-quality system for everybody and for all children that is inclusive, welcoming, and responsive to all children and all families. And our licensing standards provide a very strong foundation, highlighting the health and safety strands that run through each of these areas, as well as some very important administrative practices that programs need to have in place to be successful. And again, that's a place where we can start and build from as we work with programs. I'm going to, in a few minutes, sort of dig in and describe some of the details of each of these domains. But before we do, we thought it would be nice to just go to a video and sort of ground ourselves in seeing a classroom. With Race to the Top funding, we did in a collaboration with WGBH, we created a number of videos on practice, and we're just going to share a snip from one of them. And some of you may recognize Eleonora Villegas Ramirez is narrating, who was a longstanding board member. So let me do this.
Hello, guys. Good morning. ¿Cómo están mis niños? Yay!
Early educators do more than care for young children.
Shake it. Good job, Jackson.
We are constantly stimulating children's brains and children's thinking
See the big circle around it?
in a way that help build the foundations for what eventually becomes the roots of language, science and technology and mathematics and engineering.
It's going to cook it's made right there, it's bigger.
So provide opportunities for them to be stimulated,
Would you like to have a turn? Can you ask me, please? Sure, here we go.
to explore. It's key for us to be able to know what am I doing in the life of this child.
Could I put some wood shavings inside?
Yeah.
In it goes. Wow, there we go.
Children also want to feel safe and connected.
Hi, Nana. Oh, good morning.
And as an early educator, then I need to be in partnership with families, because that's what gives me a big part of the information that I need in order to be able to connect with the child.
Hi, how are you? I think in any early childhood setting, relationships are really the key. Bye. Wait, bye. It's building confidence for the kids. Hey, bye.
You want the parent to know that I will do anything that I can possibly do to be there for you and your baby. Our door is always open. My house is your house. Mi casa, tu casa. Come on in, get down on the floor, join us.
Oh, you see the babies? Huh? Wow.
So I'm going to stop there. I suspect we could stay with that all day. But really, don't you want to hear me talk? But I think, I can, that gives us a sense of, what does this actually look like? There's a lot that I can say about what we should see, but seeing it in action, I think, speaks volumes as well to what we're working with. And I love that video because of the ways in which those interactions are so front and center. And what we would want to see in a quality program is a context where adults and children are constantly engaging in these warm and supportive, as well as cognitively engaging interactions with each other. And those interactions create the context where the relationships are built that are really provide the foundation for a lot of children's development. It's the context in which emotional management, self-regulation skills are developed, children's resiliency is built, as well as creates an opportunity for ongoing conversations and engagement around ideas around learning that are such an important part of the early childhood classroom, and characterized by frequent turn-taking, lots of open-ended questions, and adults really listening with interest to children. I think it's important to recognize that when we're talking about conversation, it isn't just adults talking to children, but it's children and adults talking to each other and engaging with each other, and the extent to which peer-to-peer interactions and engagements are also encouraged. And those conversations provide a context in which children can explore ideas, can develop their language, build their analytic skills, and also build their motivation for an engagement in learning. Because it's through those types of interactions that the interest and the excitement and the enthusiasm also gets built. Adults provide a safe base for very young children. This is where, the classic image of the toddler running away from the adult, exploring, and then coming back to check in and then going out again is a very important part of development. And for older children, that manifests itself in the support for children taking on learning new things that might be hard, and they might experience failure in the beginning, but they're doing it in a safe context where they can persist until they master the skill.
I do just want to check, anyone on the phone have a question or want to just check in with folks on the phone?
Well, this is Maura. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, I was waiting, Jocelyn. I'm loving every minute of what you're saying and smiling. Sorry, you can't see me. I'm sorry, I'm not there.
I can now, though. I can imagine it.
With great enthusiasm. And what I'm wondering, I'm already starting to wonder what chapter 2 is as we're starting to lay the groundwork. And a few things come to mind for future engagement, maybe it's board retreat. One is, can we think about this as, can we think about having a focusing goal for all of this? When I look at the MCAS scores from 3rd grade this past year, and I see that less than half of children in the state are proficient readers, it makes me wonder, one, about having this sort of right ambitious collective goal, and two, the degree to which we want to think about this as our having early education and after school, and DESE having their obvious focus on early reading. So I guess I'm wondering if we can really push ourselves on what is the right ambitious goal. Let's be clear, literacy is not just for literacy, but it is the civil right for opening up all opportunities for children, and all the research shows that. So this is all of this, the social interactions, everything that I think is the research that you're citing, all is, to me, key enablers of that. So that's on my mind. And then also on my mind, as you know, I'm on the committee with you and colleagues on the longitudinal data system project. And so I'm just wondering, what could we do related to sort of connecting the dots between early education and kindergarten readiness and 3rd grade literacy that maybe we weren't able to do years before, thanks to the longitudinal data work that's happening intra-agency. So I wanted to just share those thoughts and push us to have a little bit of an audacious goal that anchors our logic model and our theory of action.
Thank you, Maura.
Thank you, Maura.
And part of the work of, we were talking about an operational dashboard and key performance indicators and the retreat coming up in August. I think we can add this to both of those agendas in terms of having I think you said audacious goal to me too, which I think is one we should do.
Yeah. Although I do want to comment, though, when we were putting together thinking about how to measure success on the prior slide, we were thinking about things that might not be in place right now completely, but, realistic and feasible opportunities to gather and think about data across the system. Anything else on that? So the other piece that I'm calling out in these slides is the role of the people in the program. So thinking about what the educators have to do to make these things happen, what's important for the program leaders to do. I also do want to recognize, though, that in a family child care, the educator is the educator and the program leader, and I'm not trying to suggest that this is only for center-based programs, that these are the practices and the activities that need to be that we see in all programs, but they're sometimes more integrated, and in some programs they're more separated across different people. So I think it's just important to recognize that. So in thinking about what educators need to do, I mean, throughout all of these slides, the educators need to know how to do the things that I'm talking about. And also it's important to recognize that not only do they know, educators need to have the skills and the inclination to engage in frequent opportunities for interactions with children, but they also need to know how to tailor those interactions for the needs of different children. Every child comes to the relationships with their own history, their own preferences, and the way those interactions play out are going to have to be different for different children. And it's important that linguistic and cultural differences are recognized, valued, celebrated, and responded to, and that educators understand how to do that. On the leadership side, again, this is a theme that runs through, but supporting the educator in building these skills, developing the ability, particularly by providing observation and feedback. That's a really important mechanism that needs to be in place in programs. Also ensuring that there's consistent staffing in place. This is critical for the building of interactions, that children are engaging with the same adults over time so they have the ability to build those relationships, that the adults aren't constantly changing around them. And that the leaders are modeling the positive interactions and creating an environment across the program where everybody engaging with children is engaging this way. It isn't just something that the educators are doing, but all the staff in a program that a child might encounter.
I appreciate how we're looking at the interconnectedness of all this, because even just watching that video, I was struck by them talking about the power of relationship, right? So you've got to do things to nurture those relationships, and so that consistency of who is in your life and when they're in your life is just so critical. And so appreciate that acknowledgement and how we try to challenge ourselves always to kind of figure that out. So,
Jocelyn, can I ask a question real quick? So this is wonderful, great, so happy to see all of this. And so as I was reading through everything and just listening to you now and looking at the video, you know, a lot of the research talks about, and everything you're saying here, the importance of social emotional learning, but we don't use the language of social emotional learning explicitly in the slides. So I was wondering if there's a reason for that. Like we talk about play, but you know, it's about the type of play.
It's an interesting point because some earlier versions of the slide did.
I was going to say, Jocelyn talks about social emotional learning all the time, so it may have come out of slides accidentally.
Well, I mean, I could say a little more on that, because I realized, you know, what we ended up focusing the slides on, and this was very intentional, was like on what are the practices that you would see in the classroom. And the piece that I'm sort of adding in as I talk about it, but you're right, we haven't called it, is like, what do you expect to come out of that for children? That's where the social emotional learning happen, the literacy development, like all of these things are the outcomes that we would expect to see from some of the pieces that we're talking about at the practice level. But you're right, I didn't call out specifically social emotional practices from literacy practices, in part because that wasn't the way we ended up focusing it, but also in part because this is also integrated for young children. You don't really sort of separate out your literacy block from your social studies block, from your, you know, your math block. But yes.
And I'll just say, I think Dr. Currington's having a hard time with the audio, the ability to actually ask questions too. But when we get to the after you've had a chance to go through the domains, I think she had a question about our intention for measures around quality.
Okay. So another critical component in all of this is the curriculum and assessment that's used. And curriculum is the way in which educators organize their day in a planful way around developmentally appropriate activities that are grounded in play, but that are also designed to support particular goals for children. We have a great set of standards in Massachusetts. They're infant toddler standards, or the curriculum frameworks that shape what is done in preschool. Those standards are available for educators to turn to and think about the goals that they might develop. And again, you know, social emotional goals, literacy goals, math learning, you know, whatever it is that, and that should be a balanced range of goals as well for children. and bring their understanding of the learning process and the ways in which children learn to develop a plan for the day, a plan for the week, a plan for the month that provides a variety of opportunities to learn as is appropriate. And again, those can run from, child-directed, open-ended exploration, such as, having access to a block area, but knowing that the activities that happen in that space are going to support social interaction and social learning. They're going to support mathematical learning because of the nature of the blocks and the way they support children in understanding relationships. They foster opportunities for conversations where there's an opportunity for the building of vocabulary, as well as also processing and thinking about some of the mathematical understandings that may be being explored. And ranging to, there may be moments where an educator also chooses to have a directed moment where they're supporting the phonological understanding of a child and teaching some specific skills that are also important, for example, in preschool. Books writing, other literacy activities obviously are a very important part of the curriculum and the planning of the curriculum, but again, it should be a broad-based curriculum that's attending to the range of goals that one would expect for children. As educators implement the curriculum, it's important that they also are assessing. So they have goals for children, but they're thinking about, okay, what do I see happening for each child? How am I documenting how children are engaging with the activities, what learning they're demonstrating through their activities in the classroom, and then bring that back into the planning process and the process of thinking about what happens next, what's the next step in this, what am I planning for tomorrow? It's also important that the curriculum is reflective of the children's experience, culture, and language. I've heard the term that children should have windows and mirrors in the classroom. They should see themselves reflected back, but they should see others too, and have the opportunity to learn about others' experiences. And through all of this, a critical piece of this is that educators do have the time to stop and reflect and plan so that they can put all of this in place in an organized, thoughtful, and coherent way. So, again, educators take that time to set the goals, plan the activities. Educators also have the skill to implement the curriculum. I think any of us have been in a classroom know nothing ever goes as planned when you go into a classroom. So not only do you need to know what you're trying to accomplish and why you're trying to accomplish it, you have to have the ability to respond to the moment. It's raining, you can't go outside. What are you going to do? Somebody's having a meltdown over here and you have to stop everything and take care of that. How do you keep moving forward, but at the same time being responsive to the children in the moment and what the moment is presenting to you as an educator? And then program leaders need to make sure there is that time for curriculum planning. That is really a staffing issue as well. Ensuring that materials are available, the high quality books, quality materials, and that the process of selecting an appropriate curriculum and developing appropriate curriculum are being supported program-wide. The physical environment is a component of the curriculum. It's important that the environment is thoughtfully organized, that it's safe for children to explore freely so that children have the opportunity to engage in the activities being provided and the materials provided. The educators don't have to constantly follow, restrict, and protect. Our licensing regulations provide a very strong foundation in particular for this aspect of the development. Materials should be thoughtfully selected to support the curriculum, to be varied and interesting to children, thinking about individual children's interests in particular, but also thinking about the ways in which they are accessible to all children in the classroom. Again, books and writing materials are important. Classroom arrangement also plays a very important role in the environment. You can set up a classroom to support a variety of different interactions. There might be a child that needs a quiet space to either sort of deal with some strong emotions or just to have a quiet place to sit and read a book. But children also want to work together in small groups. Sometimes you want to bring the class together, particularly in the older ages, as a whole group. So the organization of the classroom has to provide the opportunity for all those different types of interactions and groupings. And also not encourage things that you don't want. I think it's sort of the story about the classroom where I think maybe all of us have done this, where you create the running track inadvertently and suddenly you find children are drawn to those loops and running around the loops, and you can break that up by reorganizing the furniture. So there's a lot that is important in what's happening in the physical organization. And again, the materials also, as an extension of the curriculum, they're providing those windows and mirrors and reflecting the diversity of children culturally and linguistically. Educators are the ones setting up the classroom environment typically. They need to know how to do that. The structuring of routines also is a very sort of important part of organizing the time around the space, and thinking about the materials that are out, how they're arranged to be accessible, and also when they're rotated, how things are changed over time. And the leaders play a very important role in supporting educators in understanding this, and also making sure the resources are available to purchase the materials and the furniture and everything that's needed in the classroom. So then, thinking about the roles of families and the importance of engaging with families, it's really important that families and educators do collaborate in consistent and supportive ways across home and school. For children, having consistency across home and school is really critical to their sense of safety and their ability to navigate the different environments that they're in. Regular conversations, ongoing back and forth between educators and parents is really, really important, particularly soliciting information about what's happening at home and understanding not just what's happening in the school context, but what's going on in the home context. What's the child used to at home? What are the child's preferences at home and at school? And thinking about, sort of how to help everybody working with the child across all the contexts respond to and be understanding of what's happening to a child in their day. Developmental screening is a very important tool. I mentioned this earlier, but to both identify moments where a child might need additional support, but also to provide just a line of communication with families about what's happening with their child and taking a checkpoint on where a child is developmentally. Those conversations are also very important. Programs have the opportunity to create connections among families, which creates a sense of community that is also particularly supportive for children. And educators, again, all of this has to be done in a way that is really responsive and respectful of the families in the program and the diversity of the families in the program, including attention to the role that language plays in these types of engagements and ensuring that there is the opportunity to communicate with families in their home language as much as possible. So again, educators often do a lot of this work, talking regularly with families at drop-off and at pickup, welcoming families into the classroom, talking about what's happening at home and really, sort of being the navigator of that bridge between home and school. And at the same time, program leaders in this case do a lot of this work too. Program directors often engage frequently with families as well. Directors set up the context and the climate and the expectation of the types of engagements that happen in programs. They also have the opportunity to build social opportunities for families, sort of program-wide opportunities for families to connect with those in the program and with each other. And they can think about ways to empower families to take leadership roles within the program, soliciting feedback on the program, thinking about ways that families can engage in other ways outside of the classroom. And I'm going to spend less time on these because I think it's sort of been embedded, but again, just calling out the other two gears that are focused on the leadership roles. First of all, the role that the leader plays in creating a professional environment whereby there's ongoing and collective support for educators in building the skills that we just talked about across all the different domains, and that there's strong business and administrative practice. I think the staffing is the example that kept coming up in this conversation. That's an administrative practice, but it's really critical to the functioning of the program. Similarly, the extent to which the program is well-financed and uses the financing effectively to support quality in the program is going to be a key piece to the extent to which a program is able to achieve some of these goals. So I think then there was a question that I was responding to. I'm moving on to.
Dr. Currington was sort of wondering about measures and what we would use to measure quality.
So I think this is an interesting conversation. We've been asking about part 2 already. So I think what I would say, if we think about, sort of part 2 and going into 3 is, first assessing where we are and what we know about where we are as a state, while simultaneously thinking about, okay, what does that tell us about what concretely our next steps need to be on where we're going? There are many measurement tools out there, standardized observation tools in particular, that are quite valuable in the classroom. Each of which serves very important purpose. And I think one thing that we will have to figure out is, sort of how do we support programs in using the right tool for the needs of the program at the moment, while also thinking about how we're building a statewide understanding that is relatively consistent around what we're thinking about and looking for in quality and how we're measuring, and also what we understand about what's happening. So, I mean, I don't have an answer in terms of like there is this particular tool that we're going to use, because there are so many out there that all serve really very important purposes. But something that we're thinking about and happy to continue the conversation.
Just, I mean, great slides, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
I'm stealing these discuss with staff. I completely agree with the domains of quality. I think they're just really good summary. Just acknowledging that obviously it's all related to staffing and funds. Again, something as curriculum planning time seems aspirational right now when we're having such a staffing crisis. So I am also, you alluded to that already too, so I just want to acknowledge this even more bluntly that, there are things that, like you said, probably we need to look at what we need to do right now before we can even expect some of these. I think a lot of them are possible, but I think some of them definitely right now are completely impacted by the staffing crisis, and there really are practices that should be happening in every classroom for sure.
And I think starting with chapter 1, part of it was really recognizing like where we are in the field and what we're trying to do to make sure there's stable opportunities while not losing track of what we want to have happening in the classroom. And so if we're spending our time agreeing on sort of the domains, building the infrastructure to support that, and then making sure that our resources are aligned as we continue the really focused work around workforce recruitment and retention.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it highlights the way everything that you were talking about earlier is an important component of this work. There is nothing that's happening on its own.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there questions or comments at this point?
So looking ahead and thinking about what is the system that we need to build to support some of the goals that I just laid out. First of all, we want to recognize there are many different types of programs in our system, and they all have unique characteristics that are important to take into account. In a family child care home, FCC educators are really taking on the role of both educator and program leader. I alluded to this earlier, but that also has implications for the types of supports that we provide. That, we're focusing on the integration of all those different roles and providing really well-targeted support for the types of practices that happen in that particular context. And FCC educators are often working in isolation. I mean, some have assistants, but many work by themselves with groups of children. So the professional peer learning opportunities, which are really important for ongoing professional growth, just need to be something that's more intentionally made available and supported for that particular component of the workforce. FCC educators are also deeply committed and able to be responsive to families in very unique ways. They can stay late if a family's schedule is been thrown off or something's happening. I've heard stories of educators holding a space for a sibling that hasn't been born yet because they want to make sure that that child can attend the same program. And that's a loss of income for that period of time for the educator, but they're willing to commit in that way. So in thinking about the ways in which we support FCCs, we also have to think about the complexities and the opportunities that are available in that particular program type and the ways in which we support the really important resource that FCCs provide to families. In the center-based space, center-based programs vary widely from one small program with a few classrooms and one director who's doing everything from being janitor to cook to educational leader to business operator. So to larger multi-site programs where there's an umbrella agency overseeing it and able to provide a lot more capacity to support the work on the individual program. So I think it's also important for us to think about the varying staffing and the ways in which we are, building supports around the small center and around the director so we're not expecting the impossible, but also leveraging the fact that some of the larger systems have multiple roles that can play different purposes, and we could really support the different roles that are available to support educators and programs within that system. Out-of-school time programs are a really important component. Just coming out of using them myself with my children, that's where children go after school and sometimes before school. It's their home outside of the school day, which provides the programs an opportunity to engage with children in different ways and think about what they're supporting in different ways. There's often a focus on positive youth development as a primary goal in out-of-school time programs. Those programs can create leadership opportunities for children that may not have them in other places, opportunities for children to really deeply explore interests that they have, as well as provide some of the one-on-one academic supports such as tutoring that aren't always available in the school time space. Another interesting characteristic of out-of-school time programs, the workforce often includes adolescents. They're teen jobs in our after-school programs, and it's a great place for people to start working in education. And I've heard many stories of people that started there. But it also means that when thinking about the professional learning opportunities available, we do also have to think about the types of opportunities that make sense for adolescents and are supportive of both their own development and their development in a professional environment that's a new place for them. Across all these program types, our licensing standards are the foundation. We have standards for all different program types, and provide the opportunity to create that base that then we can build with technical assistance around quality improvement to scaffold growth from licensing compliance to increasing quality. So looking at the systems that we have in place to do this, we have EEC staff that provide consistent touch points, licensors in particular. And licensors work with all of the programs in the state. They connect directly with them. They have the opportunity to work with programs around the licensing standards that are so important in supporting the health, safety, and sort of foundational quality activities that we're talking about. We also have program quality specialists they cover the entire state, and we have them in most regions, but they're a regional resource. And they provide the skill set to come out and support programs in understanding continuous quality improvement, building the skill set around continuous quality improvement, but also making sure programs are aware of all the other opportunities out there in our system to support their work and support the connections and awareness and understanding of resources that could be leveraged as part of that ongoing quality improvement work. So we have the Strong Start learning management system. This has been, for the past few years, a place where we have self-paced courses available. The EEC Essentials, I think, is the one that most people are familiar with. But the system does have the capacity to support facilitated courses. It provides training in multiple languages, which is, a real strength of the system. And it's also a place where we can start to register people for other courses that we're funding through our system. So our professional development centers provide professional learning communities. They provide a lot of training. They provide coaching opportunities. We can start providing information about all of those opportunities more broadly in registration through the learning management system. So it becomes a central hub. We're committed to professional learning that's free and low cost. Again, the PDCs being the predominant example of that, but looking for many opportunities to provide the types of training that are aligned to the quality improvement agenda that we have across the state. And then we have comprehensive support systems for programs. So these are opportunities to get consultation, coaching, come directly to the program, and support the program in specific areas of its ongoing work. The PDCs provide coaching. The early childhood mental health consultation can come in, support programs. The early childhood support organizations provide a longer-term engagement with programs around the ongoing integration of the high-quality practices. So there are a number of different opportunities that we continue to build on. But we want to make sure we have a system that is available and can support professional learning across all program types and all educators. So in thinking concretely about next steps, we have paused the QRIS system during the pandemic. We're going to
just explain what the QRIS is
sure.
briefly for those members who may be new to that acronym.
Yeah. So the Quality Rating and Improvement System is a system that was in place for a number of years in Massachusetts. It was there were a set of standards that programs had to meet to move up from level 1 to level 4, level 4 being the highest. I feel like if I talk to anybody in elementary and secondary, I have to make sure that's clear. And, we would go out and evaluate. Some steps were self-rated, and some we came out and evaluated, often using the environment rating scales as a component. And then you would get a star rating. And this is something that is fairly common across states. There's also been a lot of work recently funded through both Race to the Top and some of the preschool development grants to validate the quality rating systems, and I think one of the outcomes of having multiple validation studies happening is that it was difficult to find a consistent relationship between a variety of quality rating and improvement systems and child outcomes. So, I think a lot of states right now are reassessing what they've done with QRIS and thinking about how to build on and improve. I was just at a meeting of the East Coast states in Philadelphia, and when asked how many people were revising their QRIS, I think maybe there were 2 states that weren't. And of them, one of them had already just done it and finished it. So, there's a lot of reflection and reevaluation happening in that world. What we want to do is focus our attention on developing the continuous quality improvement system and the support systems for that drive for ongoing continuous quality improvement within programs, and continue the work that we're talking about in this deck effectively. We're also looking to return to reviewing our licensing standards and revise the child care licensing regulations. That's really going to, again, be the cornerstone of everything that follows from that, and that's something that is coming.
We're likely to initiate that. Well, we've been talking about it and planning for it internally. We'll probably initiate our engagement process in the fall, October, much like we did with the child care financial assistance regulation. So we'll make sure to engage. We have a lot of stakeholders in the child care licensing, and have already gotten some really good feedback about the importance of sort of maybe having dedicated ones for those different program types for family child care, for out-of-school time, and for center-based programs, so that they're easier to follow and it's, more understandable what folks are expected to do. We had some feedback a little bit about even the new training and development director, that it would be great if that person could help be part of a training around licensing regulations. So I think we'll have a really good opportunity to be doing this quality work. The teacher credentialing work, that's a lot, and also needs to be revised within our regulations, and really thinking about how we're revising those regulations to be the foundation of this kind of quality system. So the timing is good, and we're looking forward to engaging with our community in that process.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, to your point, as we revise the credential, we're also looking to make sure that the expectations of the credential are clearly aligned to the expectations of the quality system. It doesn't require a crosswalk or like sifting through 5 different documents to figure out where the connections are, but that we, make those intersections clear. And we're also in the process of launching an early literacy working group with a team from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. I think more to your point, recognizing that literacy is a very important skill and that there are some really meaningful opportunities to think about the ways in which our entire system creates some essential foundational supports for that skill in children, and an opportunity to think about alignment across the system. So this is something that is about to be launched. We also have, we talked about this, I think, in an earlier meeting, but we have federal preschool development grant funds, and we will use those to accelerate the work in many, many ways. They're supporting the credential development. They're supporting our development of the continuous quality improvement. We're investing in a lot of the development work, sort of the professional learning, like the training and professional learning community type development that is needed for this particular system. And we continue to think about how to build a data-informed system. So there is ongoing work to think about data integration across EEC and DESI's data. Maura alluded to the early childhood information data system that was developed with the prior PDG grant. We had a planning grant a few years back, and that provided an opportunity to integrate data from DPH, EEC, and DESI across home visiting programs, our subsidy program, early childhood, special education, as well as preschool. And obviously, once you engage with the DESI data system, there's an opportunity to continue to look further on as well. So that work actually has been done and provides a potential core for some of this work, but we're also looking at other ways to integrate information into our own internal data systems. We continue to work on the expansion of developmental screening and paying attention to thinking about identifying appropriate early literacy screeners, as well as thinking about how to make those available down the road. And we talked about this a bit, but also, how do we broaden the use of standardized quality observations? And again, I think address that question of, and what ones in particular are we supporting and focusing on? And how do we also pull information from that work into the ability to look statewide at what's happening across classrooms in the state? So, part 3 maybe, we'll come back to that.
I will refrain because I know I want to jump to part 2, but I do want to acknowledge the good work, and especially as we look at just even the immediate next steps. And I know the secretary was able to just join us, but appreciate his support and just allowing us to facilitate conversations with our partners at DESE about how this work looks on behalf of the children that we serve, right? And so some of these steps that we're making as a team collectively to really make sure that we're striving towards those collective outcomes is just really exciting. And so, I'll leave it at that, but I appreciate all that you've done to put this together, because I think it shows, again, the arc of where we've been over the last 1.5 years and really setting the foundation for some exciting partnership. And again, what I keep hearing from everyone is at the center of that are the children and families that we serve, right? And living in this continuous improvement mindset of how we're constantly thinking about how to better serve those children and families. And so the involvement of a quality discussion while recognizing the current conditions that I think many in the field are working under is really important, and that conversation needs to be had. But I know I appreciate seeing some of these next steps, specifically like Maura, ready for chapter 2, especially around the early literacy, because I do believe, like Maura, that is just so critical to student success. But I do want to open it up for other board members to make some comments.
I also just want to thank my team. I certainly did not
Yes.
put this together. The quality team, everybody working in the Workforce and Programs Division has been an active part of developing these slides and will be an active part in building out the solutions. So I also want
Thank
to
you,
recognize
Jocelyn,
it.
and your entire team.
Yeah.
I think it was an excellent presentation.
I agree. I have a question. Do you see any benefit in developing a rating system going forward? I appreciate all the next steps, but is that something that would be useful?
The challenge that I think many rating systems encounter is it becomes a compliance system. And you're teaching to the test, effectively. You run the risk of teaching to the test, where I think what we know about continuous quality improvement is that agency is a really important part of that being effective, and that it's something that programs own, embrace, and make their own. So figuring out how to support that type of engagement, while also recognizing, I do think we need to be clear about our goals. We do need to have some incentives to draw people into the system. We need to have some clarity around expectations. So there's something in there that we do need to figure out, but I'm not sure it's a rating system.
Yep.
I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
very helpful. Just, we think about that in
Yeah,
medicine,
Jocelyn,
about checklists.
I would agree with that. Sorry, did I just talk
You're
over
good,
someone?
Maura. You're good. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of, one thing I've been reflecting on is maybe in the sort of journey we're about to go on, really pushing ourselves around what could go wrong, and learning from the experience of creating a rating system as like almost we created constraints around the inputs. And so anyway, I guess I'm excited for us to really push ourselves hard on how to really set this up with so that it creates the right climate and environment for us to support improvement. And I do strongly feel that there is an opportunity for us to have sort of ultimately the rating is how good are we in 5 years or 8 years at X. Like there's some North Star that I think is going to be essential for us to really make this a game-changing initiative that focuses all of us. So, I proposed third grade scores, knowing that's a blunt instrument, and there's a lot of reasons to critique it, but I think it's potentially the most helpful driving force for us, unless we have some kind of kindergarten readiness measure that I know we're working on, but is not quite ready for prime time. So anyway, repeating that again, but I'd like to make sure that's on our next steps, is to push us on in 5 years or in 8 years, some numerical goal. Even if we fail, let's set it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maura. I ditto that. Yeah. That's great. Any other comments or questions on the phone or in the room?
I just
George?
got a couple,
Yeah.
hopefully, quick ones, mostly for my own education. On the physical environment domain, is the external environment, meaning outdoor activity,
Yeah.
things of that, like how do you think about the quality and recognizing that some programs are limited in what they can offer and others aren't, and so what's the right way to frame
So
that?
thank you for bringing that up, first of all, because the external, like the outdoor environment is an important part of the environment holistically. I didn't call that out. I think that the critical component for programs with different resources to think about is sort of like, again, what are the activities that you're trying to foster? What's the development that's being supported? There are a lot of opportunities, for example, for gross motor development in the outdoor space that can also be done in, larger or smaller outdoor spaces. You can have very big and open and opportunities for free play. You can also think about more structured opportunities for physical activity. So, it isn't necessarily the extent to which a program has a beautiful play space, but the extent to which a program is really thoughtfully using their space to provide the opportunities that children need. That answers.
Yeah, no, it does, I mean, it's gonna vary, I think,
Yeah,
is the
exactly.
answer.
And that's one of the harder components of a program to control.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the space that you have, you have the
Sure,
building
land,
you have.
right.
and-
And second question, different topic, for the out-of-school time program, the adolescents that were referenced, that they're part of the employment, is there, you alluded to like professional development or something, wonder if you could elaborate, is there infrastructure in place for, I see it as an opportunity potentially to build a pipeline, right, of and I just wonder, like, what's there, what's missing? What could we do as a board to help facilitate that?
I think this is, as you just said, a great opportunity for us to think about, where those programs could potentially feed the pipeline and build that into our pipeline work. I also think that's an opportunity for us to think about some of the professional learning opportunities we develop. I think many of those adolescents are trained within their program, and they're not necessarily engaging in any external supports, and that's something that we could provide.
Future chapter, maybe.
So I think it's also an opportunity around our engagement in higher education, because if we're getting the high school students into the programs, and then we're offering some incentives and reduced costs to go to college, to pursue early childhood education or degrees that are appropriate for out of school time, then we're sort of encouraging the field. We even see it in the early childhood programs. I was at a Y, and there was a junior in high school who was on a co-op, and every other week he spent time in the classroom and, thinking about early childhood as a career and exposing folks to that in high school. It's a great way.
great.
And then helping build that pathway onto college. So I think it's a great question and a point for us. Interconnected pieces of the field.
Other comments or questions from the
I
board?
just want to say I'm really interested in the family engagement piece, and I look forward to talking to you more about the connections among families, how you build a sense of community. I think that's just so important, and just an area of opportunity, right?
Yeah, and I think I just, one other point that I realized I didn't make clearly, it was implicit in some of the things I said, but also thinking about the ways in which our connection with all of the different systems, the high schools, the higher education supports as well. We have a lot of work with the community colleges through our Career Pathways grant that I think have traditionally focused on the educators' ongoing professional learning, but, again, back to the idea that this is all one integrated system, is that those are also places where we can think about where there are opportunities to both build the pipeline and build an integrated system of supports.
Other comments from members on the phone that didn't have a chance to weigh in?
I just want to thank you for this presentation. This was fantastic, and I'm really excited and echo everything the fellow board members said, and excited to move forward with this. Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Jocelyn, I know you and your team, there's probably, I can't imagine the plans underneath the plan here, right, as we kind of narrow in on each one of these domains. And so just want to thank you and your team for putting this together today to kind of walk through it with us because I really do believe it sets the framework for the work ahead in the next year. As we think about truly the interconnectedness of all of this work and how to continue to challenge ourselves to do better. And I love the kind of continuous improvement, quality, continuous improvement mindset, because that's where we have to live right now, because the conditions just call for it. And so really appreciate the leadership of you and your team on this as we kind of look forward to the next body of work to complement this and the action associated with it. So thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we've been working, as you know, to build sort of a continuous quality improvement mindset at the agency too. And it's a natural extension for us to be building that in partnership with our field as well. So I don't think you're going anywhere yet, Jocelyn.
Well, I think I will get it. I know we're gonna take a 5-minute break because Jocelyn just did an extraordinary job of presenting, and she is also on the next panel, next topic. So we'll give a few minutes to all of us for a few minutes. So we'll be back in 5 minutes. Thank you. Allowing Jocelyn to catch her breath there for a minute. Welcome back. To get us started, I'll hand it back over to the commissioner for our next agenda item.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So switching gears a little bit, back to child care financial assistance. As you know, there's many different aspects to that system. And today we want to talk a little bit about the parent fee schedule. So as we have done over the last several months, including with the quality presentation that we just listened to, and overall, we've been trying to sort of take a couple steps back to share information about how the system works itself before we actually ask you to take some action on a piece of the system. So what we're going to do is spend a little bit of time explaining how the current parent fee schedule works. There were pretty significant changes made to it in 2021. Joss is going to walk through some of those, and Tyrese will be here to share some of how it currently works from the family's perspective, so you have an understanding of this piece of our child care financial assistance system. The reason we're bringing it to you today is because within 6 months of an agency completing a market rate survey, the board, or the state's advisory committee, which is what you are technically to our federal oversight agency, is required to take action on a parent fee scale. And today we're actually going to be asking you to reaffirm our current approach, not to make any changes. I think you'll see it's working fairly well for families in terms of affordability, but it is a fairly complicated schedule. So we envision a future where we will come back to you around specific changes. But for today, we're going to talk a little bit about what the changes were that we made at the time, kind of how it works and what the restrictions and rules are that we operate under, and then ask you to reaffirm the existing approach. So with that, I will turn it over to Jocelyn and Tyrese.
I believe I'm first, yes. So just to provide a little context, federal regulations around the Child Care Financial Assistance Program require that parents, according to their income, pay a fee that's part of the overall payment to a program. So we set rates for programs at a certain amount per child per region. We've talked about these a lot. And depending on the family size and the income of the family, the parents are potentially assigned the family is assigned a fee that they contribute, which is part of that overall payment, and then EEC will make up the difference. So I think it's just important to recognize fees don't add on top of our rates, but they are a part of the picture. And we have a sliding fee scale that identifies how much a family should pay depending on their income. And this was something that we took, it had not been changed significantly for a very long time, and so we took a hard look at this a few years ago. And in June of 2021, the board approved a new fee scale. A couple of important things to understand about the overall structure of the fee scale. Many of these things were things that have remained consistent over all the years that we've had one. But one important change that was put in place is that families with income less than the federal poverty threshold don't pay a fee. Prior to the change, if you're sort of up against it, you did have a small fee. We also have some exemptions. So families that are receiving DTA-related or DCF-related childcare do not pay parent fees. Families that are headed by non-parent caregivers or guardians are also exempt from parent fees. And we have some discounts built into the system. So if a family is approved for part-time care, they only pay 50% of the fee. They don't pay the full fee. And siblings have discounts associated with them as well. I think you pay the full fee for the first child. I believe it's 50% for the second, and then 25% for subsequent siblings. So recognizing, the cost mount up with large families and trying to mitigate that to some degree. Also, fees can adjust at the point of reassessment when a family's income is reevaluated. But we do not conduct that reassessment within the year. So there is, sort of a year's period where families are not reassessed. Unless a family opts to be reassessed because the income has dropped and the fee would drop as well, then the families do have that option, but we would never increase the fee.
Yeah, and federal CCDF rules don't allow us to make any adjustments that could negatively harm the family within the 12-month authorization.
So a couple of things that we did when we created the new parent fee scale. First of all, we based the fee that well, first of all, actually, we shifted the way in which the fee was calculated from a flat fee based on income to a percentage of the family's income. And then the other component of that is we limited the amount of income that was considered for that percentage to the income that was above the federal poverty threshold. So if you're under the federal poverty threshold, you don't pay any fee. And then when you go over it, you start out by just paying a fee on maybe $1 of income. It creates a much smoother transition into paying parent fees than prior, when you would jump right up into, not a large, but it was a full fee that was being expected based on the income that you had. So what this ends up creating is a system where most families pay a fee that is either at or less than 7% of all their income, which is a target that we are federally required to pay attention to. And overall, the fees range from 0, because they're not paying anything, to those who are right up at about 85% might pay up to 12% of their income. And one thing that we were trying to pay attention to in developing that is recognizing that we wanted to make sure we avoided a cliff. We talked about the cliff at the low end, but we also wanted to avoid too much of a cliff at the high end when parents were being expected to go from a parent fee to paying the full cost of care. So we were trying to sort of model a continuum that helped bridge that gap. And this must be reviewed by you every 3 years following the approval of the market rate survey. So we've just looked at the market rate survey, and we're coming back to talk about the parent fee scale.
So what does it look like on a parent's journey? So a parent determines that they need childcare. So for our income eligible families, they're going to reach out to us via our lovely wait list. And so the parent joins the wait list, and then they're notified that funding's available, and they go through their eligibility process, right? And so if you're looking at the slides, I'm on slide 3, right? Parent receives their funding availability from their CCR&R or from a contracted provider, and then they say, hey, we need these documentation to verify your residency, your identity, and then your income. The income is then assessed, and then there's the fee. Right. So once the fee is assessed, like Jocelyn just explained, there's no changes unless the fee would go down. That would happen in that 12-month period, and then the family reauthorizes is every 12 months, right? So what is really key is that there's no change in that first 12 months unless it will reduce the fee. It wouldn't go over. The only other time I think a fee would change or something would impact an authorization is if the family really moved out of state, and that means they wouldn't be eligible anymore.
Terry, so I'm just pointing out, this third box is where we're piloting our text messaging. So when somebody's eligible for funding, we're piloting texting them instead of sending them a paper letter. So we will keep you updated on how that's going.
So I actually have an update. I was looking at the data while Jocelyn was giving her presentation, just out of curiosity. We're in about our third week. And what I'm happy to say is, like, what happens is in the text pilot is that a funding availability letter goes out and they receive a text. And then there's a nudge if there's no response, right? Maybe 2 people haven't responded. And so what that tells us is that the text messaging is working. And so then we have a number of other nudges that happen in the journey, meaning like Mass 211 calls these families to say, hey, let's do a soft eligibility check, get their paperwork, and they send them our, what we're calling our digital application. And I have to tell you that most folks are completing the application and then they don't need the next nudge. So that's really exciting. Sorry. My work phone ringing. So we know that all that to say, like, we're piloting the text messaging pilot is in the western and central regions, and we know that it's working. We've probably reached about, I think when I added it all, maybe we've sent over 52 text messages. Great. And so it works.
It's not completely germane to the parent fee schedule, but I just thought it might be interesting to point out where that comes in this process.
Thank you. Next slide. Oh, I have it. Sorry. So then here's an example of the family experience as it relates to their income. So you have a two-person family here, and they have a gross income of $1,700, and they need childcare. We look at the federal poverty guidelines. For a family of 2, it's $1,526 monthly. So this parent's fee would only look at $174. So that 174 is what's over the federal poverty level. As Jocelyn explained, anything under the federal poverty level, we don't count. So based on their income and the minus, the 174, right? Their estimated parent fee for the month is $6.96, right? Significantly lower than it was previously. So that if you're looking at it, I see your face is shocked, right? So,
Oh, it's great.
so clearly a lot of work done, and this work was done before I was here. And when we presented this last week, I was like, Jocelyn, that's awesome, right? Like I was like, that's awesome as someone who has worked in the field before, and families see that go from no parent fee to like a higher parent fee. This would feel a lot different to that household of two. And if you look at it by percentages, it's 4%, right? 4% of that amount over the federal poverty guideline. And the fun part,
As we mentioned, what we're asking you to do today is just to reaffirm the existing parent fee schedule by taking a vote to approve the agency's current approach.
Do we have any questions before we move to a vote?
Can I just ask, where does the money go?
To the program.
Okay, so it's
just
intended
filters
to
back there.
subsidize the actual.
We know what our payments are adjusted based on the parent.
So the
fee.
individual program's the recipient of the fee, so it helps them administer the program. Okay, got it.
So we set
So
an overall
monthly.
rate, say it's $60 a day, and then based on the parent fee schedule, the parent owes 10. We adjust ours, so we pay the program 50, and they collect 10 from the
Got
parent.
it, okay.
So the program has to enter their information, and it goes through the billing process, and
Got
then
it.
it goes
And
right back out.
they have the arrangement with the parent, just like a private pay parent would have.
So it's from like an administrative burden standpoint, it sounds like it's relatively low. No?
Well,
No?
we're working on some improvements there, but like yes and no. So it's an administrative process, right? So there's work that the provider has to do, and then there's work that the child care resource and referral agencies have to do. And then what's great about it is everyone is on EFT now. And so where before the slower part of the process may have been receiving the payment, now we know that that's going through EFT.
I'm just curious, when people don't respond to the text, do you say you call them if they're next on the list? And
So we have two waitlist initiatives, and so we have the text messaging, and then we also have we call it our financial assistance case tracking, and where Mass 211 is actually doing outreach calls to families from the wait list.
To clean it up and get,
so
are you
it's-
still interested in being on the waiting
Yeah.
list? So there's two separate things. If you're coming up on the waiting list, we're piloting, getting a
They're
text, hey, we have funding available for you, get in touch, and then we're nudging them to do that.
And they get a call there too.
And they get a call.
Yeah.
And then overall, we're contacting everyone on the waiting list via email or text to try and get their wait list records updated. So we have about 20,000 families on the waiting list right now. We don't think that data is really very current. So we want to make sure that we have accurate
You
data.
want to keep that communication going.
Yeah, and try and move people through more quickly.
Yeah, we launched the waitlist cleanup last week, and we sent out 2,900 texts. We've already received 921 responses. 800 of those families have updates. Right, and so we know it's the people are being responsive.
Great, and their cell phones, that's
Right. And one of the things we know from the early educator pilot, because when we did outreach for that program, this is the pilot to allow staff working in early education and care programs, that their data was current and up to date, and they moved through the system much quicker. So we have very old waitlist records. So right now, our child care resource and referral agencies are spending a lot of time with families whose information is outdated. They may not still be eligible. They may be receiving financial assistance already. They might have moved out of state. So the more we can have that wait list be accurate when there is funding available, we can get people enrolled in those vouchers more quickly. So it's part of the goal.
Yeah, and it'll help us better understand actually who's on the wait list, right? There's families who may already have, if they already have a child in care and they're receiving a subsidy, they have sibling access, so we could reach out to those families. There may be other families who are not receiving care, but their children, but they're currently paying out of pocket, probably private fee. You have those families as well. Just seeing like who are the families, and are there other ways for us to reach those that are in need right now?
The other important part of our waitlist cleanup project is getting a better idea of sort of capacity issues. So the more we have updated data, the more we can say, some families will stay on the waiting list because they can't find an infant slot in Leominster. And so the more that data is current, the more we'll be able to look at the waiting list and see patterns to say, oh, we have a real capacity issue in this age group, in this town, or in this region. So it'll help us get a better sense of sort of demand.
A quick question, the exemptions on the parent fees, is that state regulations or exemption, or is that federal mandate?
I think it's a combination. We're given that there are some that they require, and then there are options that the state takes. So in the regulations, for example, you all opted to exempt homeless families from fees.
Teen parents is another point that, like, I've always, they are actually not
In the
exempt.
yeah,
They're
in
not
federal
exempt.
young parents, yeah. That
And is that a
they're-
federal? Is it, okay.
Yeah.
So, because they have to go through the eligibility process as well, so I thought there would be maybe a way to like eligibility, automatic eligibility, just like, you know.
If they're referred by the
Or-
Department of Transitional
Yeah.
Assistance, they wouldn't pay a fee.
So that's,
But
yeah,
if they're
that's a good
coming
point.
off the income eligible waiting list, they would be treated like any other income eligible family, not exempt from the fee.
This is where Maria gets into like, how do you interact with us? If you're on the wait list, it's a little bit different versus the referral. So most of our families that we receive a referral for, they are those priority populations or those populations that are exempt from the fee.
So all DTA-referred families and all
CF.
DCF-referred families are exempt from paying any fees.
I just feel like there needs to be a campaign for all families to
Yeah.
know, you know, like
Yes.
to navigate.
Yes.
So,
Well, part of the reforms is to make the
Yeah.
system more navigable and then to give information to families
great.
about how to navigate
Thank
it too.
Or so they can better understand where are they, right? Like what is, I have 3 things happening in my life. I'm a young parent, I'm experiencing domestic violence, and I'm also homeless, right? What does that mean for me? Yeah.
Any questions on the phone regarding the parent fee schedules? No? Great. I move that the Board of Early Education and Care, in accordance with General Law, Chapter 15D, Section 2, and 606 Code of Massachusetts Regulation 10.03, 2A2, hereby reaffirms the parent fee scale that was approved in 2021 and authorizes its continued use. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Linda. I'll call the roll. Georgia Tanasoff?
Yes.
Linda Sager?
Yes.
Carolyn Kane?
Yes.
Maria Moeller?
yes.
Jamela Lee?
Yes.
Cheryl Travers?
Yes.
Maura Siegel?
Yes.
Secretary Tutwiler?
Yes.
And Stephanie Carrington. All right, and the chair votes yes as well. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Okay, the last item for today's agenda, a little board business for us. We're going to talk a little bit about updating our board bylaws. And then I think we have 2 votes. One is to accept the board bylaws and also the appointment of a vice chair. So I won't steal the thunder except to say that as part of the sort of modernizing and maturing as an agency, I think we recognized the need to make sure that our bylaws were current, and we went back and found some from 2005. And not only does the agency, has the agency...
And then I think we have 2 votes. One is to accept the board bylaws and,
If I could just ask folks to mute on the phone, thank you.
That'll make me. And also just the way we do business has shifted, particularly in the last several years. So Janice, do you want to walk us through some of the changes?
Sure, happy to do so. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Commissioner, Mr. Secretary on the phone, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity. You heard earlier today about a lot of our initiatives, our external-facing initiatives and the strategic work that we're going to embark on moving forward. But we thought it was really important to take a step back and look inward and look at our own, how we conduct business as a board. I consider it a good organizational hygiene and part of the agency's maturing process, as the commissioner referenced. So, and here we are, as part of that, updating our board bylaws. By way of a bit of brief history, the board bylaws first came into effect, let me see if I can, oh, there it is, look at that. The board bylaws came into effect in 2005, and that is the last time that the board bylaws were updated. It's when EEC became officially EEC. So it's been a bit, and as we all know here, over the course of the last 18 years, there's been a lot that has changed. As an example, remote participation in a meeting wasn't a thing in 2005. It's certainly a thing now, as we see here. So we thought it was time for us to make sure that our bylaws were updated, that they reflect current practices, current procedures. And how we started this was, again, we looked at those 2005 bylaws and saw what we could keep, what was still relevant. We also took a deep dive into the bylaws of our sister agencies, DESE and DHE, to see where we could align and see where we could take from the work and the practices that they did to ensure as much alignment as we could across the Secretariat. We made textual changes to improve readability throughout the document. I think what we've learned, and I think what you've seen throughout even the regulations that we put before the board several months ago, how we used to write and how we used to present information, I think, has also changed, and we want to make sure that our bylaws are accessible, just like everything else that we're doing is accessible. And I will go through just a couple of the highlights, but before I do, I just want to give a very quick shout out to Assistant General Counsel Elizabeth Storms, who took the laboring oar in really doing a deep dive into these bylaws, and she would have been the one presenting them here today, but she is on maternity leave, having just celebrated the birth of her son.
So that pun was intended.
Exactly. So in any event, so I am here trying to fill her big shoes. So thanks to Liz when she ever has a chance to watch this. So one quick note I also did want to add, we did get a comment from, after the board had received the bylaws for review, wondering about board composition. We have added a cite into the bylaws that relates to our statute that talks about basically how board members are appointed, which board seats come from what organizations. So that cite is in Article 1 in the organization and function of the board in the most recent draft that the board has. Otherwise, what we have here is our highlights, and I won't go through the entire text, you all have them. We wanted to really put some process in place for scenarios around attendance requirements, because that is part of our statute. And our statute requires that board members not be absent, for more than 4 meetings in a fiscal year. But we wanted to make sure that there was a way to make board members aware of what that requirement was and notice when should that be a situation that we need to handle. So what we've done was we updated our language to require that the secretary of the board, who is the commissioner or her designee in this scenario, to provide written notice to any member who accrues 3 absences from board meetings and let them know that they're at risk of losing the seat. And we also require that the chair provide written notice to the Secretary of Education, and if we get to 4, to notify the governor that there is a vacancy on the board. So we, again, wanted to make sure that that was as clearly spelled out as it could be.
Is that, is that pursuant to statute?
Yes, it is pursuant to statute. And we do, it's section 3, 15D section 3 on page, I think it's 2 or 3, it's section 1A, meeting attendance. We also propose a new section to have the board let folks know where their meeting is going to be. And in fact, you've already complied with the proposed regulation, thank you for that, by setting the annual calendar for next fiscal year. We do provide some flexibility to allow for notice locations at at the meeting prior. So at the meeting, say if we were meeting in July, at today's meeting, you would announce the location for the following meeting. Another quick highlight is to allow the chair to arrange specific, strategic planning, and you heard a little bit about that today, that we were thinking about having a strategic planning event in August. This codifies that and puts it into our bylaws. It also allows for that meeting to be held either in person or remote. The big ticket item, I think, is number 3 on the slide in front of you, and in Article 2 of the actual bylaws. It talks about remote participation. And again, 2005, it wasn't a thing. I think we've come to learn that it is going to be something that's around for quite a bit, but we again wanted to create some structure around that for board members, to again allow for people to understand that it is important to be in person, but we also understand that there are times when folks need to perhaps not be here and participate remotely, as we see today. So we have proposed a new section that adds that structure and allows board members to participate remotely if proper notice is provided to the chair. And throughout the document, we've made it clear that proper notice is email is allowed. We don't need to require people to send written notice through snail mail or anything else. So an email does suffice there. And permissible reasons are quite broad, and they include everything from an illness to an emergency, which includes inclement weather. And I think anyone here in the Commonwealth appreciates that while it can be sunny and wonderful here in the Metro Boston area, out in the western part of the state, we could be dealing with a blizzard. So inclement weather is a reason for remote participation. And
It's usually sunny out there, and it's the opposite.
It's opposite over
Yeah.
here. It's rainy and terrible over here. But again, we did want to make sure that we reflect that and reflect the reality of life. And the chair has broad discretion to permit that.
I have a question.
Sure.
Sorry. So provided, it says geographic distance, right?
Mm-hmm.
It says provided the members outside of Massachusetts on the scheduled meeting date?
That could be for example, if a board member happens to be traveling.
It says provided that instead of, for example.
Oh, I'm using that colloquially in my part.
Yeah. I just think that's a little strict. I mean, it could be, someone's on vacation down the Cape or out in the Berkshires and we're meeting in Boston, and so geographic location, it's sort of, that's a burden for them on that particular board meeting.
Sure, and that's why we wanted to put the catch-all at the end, that any other reason in the chair's discretion.
Right, I see that, but.
So that's why we wanted to make sure of that. But we also wanted to recognize that somebody might be at a conference out of state. Somebody may be, it could be a vacation, although we hope that folks are using their vacation time to enjoy their personal time. But we also, again, wanted to provide for that level of flexibility if, in the situation that you're talking about,
The
where perhaps.
9D that you're reading?
9D, right, V, where it says geographic distance. My concern is that provided that means, to me, that's saying geographic difference only if you're outside of Massachusetts. I realize there's other extenuating circumstances, but I don't think you should have to be outside of Massachusetts.
Would you propose striking that last clause?
Which we certainly could do.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, can I just so that I'm clear, striking
After.
from provided to outside of Massachusetts on the scheduled meeting date?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank
Just
you.
so, of course.
Any questions on the phone?
And there was one last
No.
highlight, oh, sure, that I wanted to highlight. It's been 18 years. We don't want it to be 18 years again before we look at these again. So what we have written into these bylaws is an expectation that the board will review them once every 5 years to make any changes, obviously keep what is still relevant, but make any changes that may need to be made to keep up with the times. So we're not looking at something almost 2 decades after it was put in place. And those are the main highlights. And I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any. Or of course, take any suggestions if the board doesn't think, if there are things that make better sense, we're certainly happy to incorporate that in.
I know I heard from one person on the phone. Any other comments or questions from anyone on the phone?
Just a call, oh, sorry, on the phone, I'm not on the phone.
Provided that you're on the phone.
Carolyn, did you have another?
No, I mean, I think it's important to have.
Thank you, Secretary.
I think it's important to have bylaws, and I do echo the sentiment that it's a much more effective, collaborative meeting if people can be in person, but that's, life interferes with that for a various number of reasons, so providing that flexibility, especially since if you miss 4, your seat is declared vacant, I like to be flexible where possible.
Appreciate it.
And we want to make sure that we're able to maximize participation with unforeseen conflicts, which I know several of the folks on the phone had today and still got to be here and participate in the meeting. And so we think that's really important and allowable in today's environment. So we wanted to reflect those in the bylaws.
Yeah, I think we've all learned over the last couple of years, especially how to leverage all the tools we have for engagement, right? And trying to still sort out how to do that in the most effective way. And so, I appreciate, again, in service of all the work that feels like it's been presented to us over the last couple of months of, just making sure that we're looking at our own regulations, not only to the ones that affect the field, but ourselves in the bylaws, again, since if these haven't been looked at since 2005, just seems like good hygiene to governance to bring this forward and make sure it reflects the way that we are operating for future board members and for future boards. So
It also shows we hold ourselves accountable
Absolutely.
just like we do everybody else, right?
Yep.
So,
And unless there are further questions, we'd ask that the board approve the bylaws, obviously subject to a motion, but with the edit and the striking of the clause that Board Member Kane has suggested.
So I'll make a motion, I move that the Board of Early Education Care hereby approves the presented as the permanent bylaws as amended per our discussion effective June 13th, 2023, and until such time as they are revoked, rescinded, or amended by the board. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Maria. I'll call the roll. George Atanasoff.
Yes.
Linda Sager.
Yes.
Carolyn Kane.
yes.
Jamela Lee.
Yes.
Maria Moeller.
Yes.
Secretary Tutwiler.
Yes.
Cheryl Travers.
Yes.
Stephanie Carrington. All right. Well, thank you. The bylaws have passed. Janice, thank you. Please extend. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Please extend thanks to your team and congratulations to the member of your team who's added someone to their family. But I appreciate all the work on this to again, as I think Carolyn said it right, hold ourselves accountable for the way that we operate as a functioning board. So thank you.
You're welcome, thank you, and we'll make that edit, and we'll recirculate it to the board with the change.
Appreciate it.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right.
Stay.
Yeah.
Just in case there's any questions.
Yeah.
Please.
Just last piece of business, important for us to recognize the bylaws and amend them to reflect the way that we operate. But the board also is permitted to appoint a chairperson of the board, and the vice chairperson is responsible for performing the duties of the chairperson at the chairperson's request or in the absence of the chairperson. And so with that, I wanted to move that the Board of Early Education and Care elects Maria Moeller as vice chairperson of the board. Can I have a second?
Second.
Carolyn, thank you. I'll call the roll.
Second.
Thank you. I'll call the roll. George Atanasoff.
Yes.
Linda Sager.
Yes.
Carolyn Kane.
Yes.
Jamela Lee.
Yes.
Maria Moeller.
Yes.
Cheryl Travers.
Yes.
Secretary Tutwiler.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes as well. Thank you, Maria, for your service, but also serving as vice chairperson. So thank you. Before we offer some final comments?
No, I think that
That's our
concludes
last-
the formal agenda.
Yeah, that's our last piece of business. I just want to thank everybody for coming. As was mentioned, the board will hold a retreat over the summer to talk about some of the many things that we talked about today in Jocelyn's presentation, but as we look forward to the next fiscal year. And I want to end where I began with a thank you. And I did ask the commissioner to take some time today to reflect on the work of the agency over the last year, because there is so much work that is needed to be done and has been done. And I just believe that it is important to take a minute every once in a while to reflect on the foundation that you all, the team has laid, and hopefully the board has supported to enable us to really do continue the innovation and the continuous improvement that you all have shown over the last year into the next fiscal year. And so, again, I mentioned earlier, the arc of the work here, just since I've been on the board for not that long, has been incredible, and just really grateful for the leadership and excited to see what's to come in the future. So thank you all.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Have a nice summer.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned.